guys, this is our last video lesson of Romeo and Juliet because this is the last scene, Act 5, Scene 3. Your YouTube film version that I have for you misses the first part of the scene. It's not uncommon for productions to skip the very first part of this scene, but I'm going to ask you questions about it because it is part of the text. So, Paris is the one we see at the opening of the scene. And Paris has come to honor Juliet and put flowers on her grave. And Paris sends his page to go stand watch. In case anyone is coming, then Paris will know about it. Paris says that he plans to, I'm on page 1 still, he plans to visit Juliet's tomb every night and cry over her and bring her flowers. And then Paris's page whistles because someone's coming. And we know the person who's coming is either Romeo or Friar Lawrence, depending on which one comes first. So now we're at page 2, and we find out that it's Romeo. So Romeo says to Balthazar, "Give me that mattock and the wrenching iron." So Romeo also has brought tools with him to break into the tomb. And Romeo says, "Hold, take this letter. Early in the morning, see thou deliver it to my lord and father." So we find out that the letter that Romeo wrote in scene 1 was a letter to his father. And Romeo tells Balthazar, don't do anything to intercede. Regardless of what you hear, don't come in here. Don't come behind me because Romeo's going to go into the tomb. And Romeo tells Balthazar, you don't need to worry because all I want to do is I want to see Juliet again and I want to take a ring. And it is a ring that's on Juliet's finger. We can assume it's probably the ring that Juliet sent with the nurse to give Romeo. Juliet probably took it back. It could also be their wedding ring. Okay, so Romeo says to Balthazar, if you do come back, I will kill you. I will rip you apart and throw all your body parts all over the churchyard. And he says, the time and my intents are savage, wild, more fierce and more inexorable, far than empty tigers or the roaring sea. So Romeo says, I'm desperate and crazy, so you must stay away from me. And Balthazar says, okay, I will. And Romeo gives Balthazar money and says, you've been a good friend to me, goodbye. So he just told Balthazar that he didn't intend to do anything bad, but then he gives him money and says goodbye, like he's never going to see him again. So Balthazar says on page 3, even though Romeo threatened him, he's still going to stay behind and watch and see what happens. Okay, so Romeo goes to the opening of the tomb, and he compares the tomb to a mouth or stomach that is swallowed, he says, the dearest morsel of the earth, which is Juliet. And he says, and in despite, I'll cram thee with more food, which is himself. Now, Paris sees Romeo trying to break into the tomb of Juliet. And Paris says, and here is come to do some villainous shame to the dead bodies. I will apprehend him. Stop thy unhallowed toil, vile Montague. Can vengeance be pursued further than death? Condemned villain, I do apprehend thee. Obey and go with me, for thou must die. So Paris thinks that Romeo has come to break into the tomb of the Capulets, not to see Juliet, but to desecrate the body of Tybalt. So Paris thinks that Romeo isn't happy enough that he killed Tybalt. Now he wants to come and do bad things to the body of Tybalt. So Paris tries to apprehend him, to stop him. Okay, and Romeo says, I must indeed, and therefore came I hither, which is pursuing vengeance further than death. Romeo says, good, gentle youth, tempt not a desperate man. Fly hence and leave me. Think upon these gone. Let them affright thee. I beseech you, youth. Put not another sin upon my head by urging me to fury. Oh, be gone. By heaven, I love thee better than myself, for I come hither armed against myself. Stay not, be gone, live, and hereafter say, a madman's mercy bid thee run away. So Romeo begs Paris to leave him alone. Like, he says he's mad, he's furious, like, he can't be trusted. Please, Paris, just leave me alone. I don't want to hurt you. I want to hurt myself. And that's on page 3. And then on page 4, Paris says, I do defy thy commination, and apprehend thee for a villain here. Okay, so Paris doesn't believe him, and he still tries to apprehend him. And Romeo and Paris fight. The page sees them fighting. This is Paris's page, and he goes to call the watch, which is the policeman. So when the policemen show up later on in the scene, it's because Paris's page has gone to fetch him. Okay, and then Paris, is stabbed, and he asks a final request: open the tomb, lay me with Juliet. So Paris asks to be buried with Juliet. Paris dies, and Romeo promises Paris that he will do it. Okay, and then Romeo looks at Paris, recognizes him for who he is, and said that Balthazar told him on the ride here that Paris was actually supposed to marry Juliet, and Romeo didn't know anything about it before then. And then he says that he will bury thee in a triumphant grave. So he will bury Paris in Juliet's grave. Okay, so then he opens the tomb and he sees Juliet. Now I'm on page 5. There's a lot happening here in Romeo's soliloquy. Romeo says to Juliet, death that hath sucked the honey of thy breath hath had no power yet upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, and death's pale flag is not advanced there. So Romeo says Juliet looks alive. She doesn't look like a dead person. She still has color in her cheeks and lips. The reason is, number 1, she's not dead. And number 2, she's very close to waking up. So the blood is returning back to her complexion. Romeo says sees Tybalt's body, talks to Tybalt, asks him for permission for killing him. Okay. And he says, this is to Juliet now. Shall I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous, and that the lean, abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour? For fear of that, I still will stay with thee, and never from this palace of dim night depart again. Here will I remain with worms that are thy chambermaids. Oh, here will I set up my everlasting rest, and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. Eyes look your last, arms take your last embrace, and O lips, O you, the doors of breath, seal with a righteous kiss the dateless bargain to engrossing death. Come, bitter conduct, come, unsavory guide, thou desperate pilot, now at once run on the dashing rocks thy seasick, weary bark. Here's to my love. And Romeo drinks the poison that the apothecary sold him. O true apothecary, thy drugs are quick. Thus, with a kiss, I die. And so Romeo is now dead in Juliet's tomb. And that is at the bottom of page 5. And then page 6, outside of the tomb, so the tomb would have been like an interior part of the stage, but you would have been able to see outside of it as well. Friar Lawrence comes onto the stage just like that much too quick. And he says, St. Francis, be my speed, how oft tonight have my old feet stumbled at graves. And stumbling was like a bad omen for them. So he is too slow. And Friar Lawrence says, who is there? And it's Balthazar, who is Romeo's servant. So Friar Lawrence sees a light in the tomb. Balthazar says that Romeo is in there, and he's been there for 30 minutes. And Friar Lawrence asks Balthazar to go with him. Balthazar says, I won't, I'm too afraid. And then Friar Lawrence says, stay then, I'll go alone. Fear comes upon me. Oh, much I fear some ill, unthrifty things. So Friar Lawrence basically knows that he's too late. And then Friar Balthazar says that he fell asleep and dreamt that Romeo fought Paris. We know that it actually happened, but Balthazar thought it was a dream. And then Friar Lawrence appears. He sees blood on the ground. He sees Romeo's body. He also saw swords. He sees Romeo's body, and he sees Paris's body. And Paris is, his body is bloody. And then Juliet awakes. So she woke up just like a matter of minutes too late to stop it. Okay, and Juliet wakes up and she says, where's Romeo? I remember where I was supposed to be, and there I am, and you told me Romeo would be here, so where is he? Friar Lawrence hears a noise, and gosh darn Friar Lawrence, I love him. He has a great heart. He does what he thinks is right, but he's also a chicken. And so Friar Lawrence hears a noise, and he begs Juliet to come with him. He says, a greater power than we can contradict hath thwarted our intent. So it's not intended for things to work out. And then he says, Romeo is dead and Paris is dead. And Friar Lawrence says, I'm going to take you and put you with a sisterhood of holy nuns. So I'll put you in a nunnery. And then he says, stay not to question, for the watch is coming. Go, good Juliet, I dare no longer stay. So please, Juliet, come with me. And Juliet says, I won't leave. And Friar Lawrence leaves because he's afraid of being caught in the tomb. I am almost out of time, and I'm going to stop this, and then I'll pick up in a part 2.